So first, thank you for just allowing for this interview and welcoming me here. It's very kind of you.
I'm a very kind hand.
That's good.
But what others may claim me.
That's good. Yes, and because of my research that I do on eco initiatives here in Armenia, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Can you kind of summarize or explain the situation with locals from the time that you came here? What was their approach or let's just say approach towards you, and how it is now, how it's changed over the years? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in 2018, 7 years ago,
Yeah.
I heard about Kalavan village while I was staying in Dilijan, which is about an hour away, because I was looking for rural locations where I could buy a house and kind of retire in a sense. I had been a nomad for more than 10 years, traveling around the world quite a bit. I went to more than 50 countries in my 20s, and I decided, I was 30 then, that it was time for me to do the opposite and settle into one place and kind of commit myself to one location to see how that experience would help me grow and also what kind of impact I could have on the world around me. And I looked at several villages and rural locations in the general Dilijan area. And a friend of mine, who is actually now my wife, but at the time she was a friend, heard about Kalavan because there were a lot of politicians promoting it as an eco-village and is a place of entrepreneurial and cultural development. And I said, well, that sounds exactly like the kind of place someone like me should go to, because I am a personal development coach and author, and I often write and teach about these kinds of things, particularly related to economics and teaching people to become entrepreneurially empowered, which was particularly appealing to me in a post-Soviet, post-communist country that is gradually coming to accept the benefits of economic self-determination and individual liberty. Topics that are very close to my heart. So I went with my now wife to visit Kalavan a few times. It was about an hour away, and we were greeted by the local politicians who were promoting the village. They were very friendly. They rolled out the proverbial red carpet for us, treated us very well, as they do to everyone who comes to visit Kalavan. Everyone will say the same thing. And I told these politicians all about my plan and what I wanted to do and why I was looking to buy some property and if they knew of anything available. And not only did they know about this house, which was the last house available for sale, they welcomed me to come here. They really wanted to help me finish the purchase process and move in here because, the story was that what they wanted to do, their vision for the village, was very much in line with what I wanted to do as an individual. My skill sets, my talents and passions matched what the story they were telling. And so they helped me buy this house for $7,000.
Wow.
Which sounds very cheap, but if you see what the house looked like 7 years ago, it was like camping, basically, is how I described it. When I first moved in, there was no plumbing or electricity. Most of the windows were broken. There were no doors. The whole roof had to be replaced. So yeah, of course, that's cheap for a house, but it was basically in the worst possible condition a house could be in and still be structurally intact. But more surprisingly was after I moved in, which was only a few months after I bought the house, the social reception to me was completely different than how they presented it to me when I first visited, and they convinced me to move here, which is what happened. They convinced me to move here because I would not have bought a house and moved to a place where I did not feel like I was being explicitly welcomed. That's the primary reason I chose Kalavan over the other places I had been searching for, because of that social aspect that was promised to me. They seemed actually surprised that I actually moved in here. I'm convinced now that they just thought I would buy the house, and I'm sure they got a huge commission on the sale of the house. I'm sure some of that $7,000 went into their pockets. And it was like they didn't know what to do with me once I actually showed up in the house that I bought and was talking about all these plans we had made, all these ideals they had put forth. And even the simplest things like getting the plumbing and electricity installed, stuff that should have been very easy to do for locals who have experience with these kinds of skills, as many of them do, just took months and months to get done in even the minimal possible way. There was a situation where the guy who invited me to come live here, local politician, asked me to send him $500 so that he could send a team of people to start installing the plumbing and the electricity. And 6 months went by and he did nothing. And with me constantly reminding him, hey, I'm living here without running water. Hey, can I have my money back so I can pay someone else to do the job? And he just keeps saying, oh, we already bought all the materials we need. We'll get it done right away. And all of it was bullshit. And it took me about a year to get my money back from him. And then I eventually finally got plumbing installed in my own house and a proper bathroom built. Prior to that point, I was pooping in a dry compost toilet that I built for myself because I just had to make do with the situation I was in. So I honestly believe that he just thought I would give up when I saw how frustrating it was without running water and trying to get anything done with the locals. And I would just leave and eat. And maybe I'd even forget about the $500 I sent him because I don't know how else to explain the animosity and just carelessness and apathy I was treated with once I actually moved into the place that welcomed me to come live here. Yeah. And I spent a couple years still trying to somehow act on those ideals and that vision. Like I offered to teach English for free at the school. Obviously, I'm a native speaker, but I'm also an experienced English teacher in many countries around the world. And they in many places I've lived in the world, that's really, really highly valued. Like you can get a job almost anywhere in Asia if you just show up and say, I'm a native English teacher. And here they seemed afraid of me. Like they didn't want me interacting with the kids. And the local English teachers seemed threatened by my English abilities because, of course, most of them aren't actually very good at English and they're afraid that they will be exposed by a native speaker who corrects their mistakes and shows how to do the job better. So you quickly realize that virtually everything they said are just kind of like buzzwords they're parroting. They don't know what being eco-village means. They don't know what entrepreneurship means. They don't know how economics works on the most basic level. But the people who told this very compelling story and took hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money from USAID and UNDP, they know this, of course. They're marketers. That's their job. The job is to create an appearance that something amazing is being done here. And for the one day that you come to visit and take pictures and do interviews, it looks really, really impressive. There's this really expensive community center that was completed right when I moved in that was funded through $150,000 of US aid money. And I don't believe it has been used for a single community function in 6 years. But they still do interviews for the local news, showing off their amazing community center, acting like it's creating jobs for the locals and who knows what other bullshit, they make up. And you realize after a few years of this, this is not just an isolated thing. This is the general Armenian cultural mentality. They don't really seem to have a respect for reality. They don't seem to understand the difference between a story they tell and things that are actually happening. And it took me a couple of years to finally accept I cannot work with the locals at all because they live according to their own rules in their own little universe, in their own little matrix they've created that has virtually nothing to do with reality. And that's when I started deciding I needed to take things into my own hands, focus on doing my own thing here that is not dependent upon cooperation with the locals and bringing in other foreigners that I could actually collaborate with and who actually shared my values.
Yeah. Okay. And what would you say made you stay despite all of those adversities that you talked about here in Armenia and in Kalavan specifically?
Well, because the reasons I bought a house in a rural village were not strictly dependent on the social circumstances. Primarily, I wanted to be away from society.
Okay.
I wanted to feel like I was living on the edge of the earth while not completely abandoning the modern world, not just running off to the forest alone somewhere, which I guess some people do, and that's a valid choice for them. But I still wanted to have the internet, electricity, the opportunity to go to a grocery store when I needed to. And so a rural village seemed like basically the best way you could do that, like being as far removed from society as possible, but still having access to the benefits of society. And the primary reason I wanted to do that was to be free from coercive cultural expectations and influence, which is the kind of thing that you grow so used to that you forget that it's even there until you get away from it. It's the kind of thing I learned a lot about while I was traveling throughout my 20s, when I first realized that, I grew up in Southern California and learned to live and think a certain way, but as soon as I get on a plane to another country, people live and think in a completely different way. And to them, that's just as normal as the people back home in California.
Yeah.
And you do this over and over and over again. And eventually you realize that all of it is kind of just made up and arbitrary, but everybody acts like, no, the way we do it is the way you have to do it. And there's something wrong with you if you don't see things the way we see them and do things the way we expect you to. And parents and society enforce these views on their kids. And eventually nobody really knows who they are or what they want. And they have very little freedom to decide for themselves who they want to be and how they want to live. So the only solution I saw to that problem was to get away from large population densities that kind of assert this unconscious influence.
Yeah. Okay. And would you say, because you have some Armenian roots, would you say you feel connected to that culture, or as you said, you were a bit more outside of the culture?
Well, my grandmother was Armenian. She escaped the genocide and moved to California. So that makes me 1/4 Armenian, but I was not raised culturally Armenian at all. Didn't speak the language or practice the religion. Sometimes we ate the food at home, but that was about it. And really, I didn't even visit Armenia till I'd been to about 40 other countries. It wasn't even like a top priority for me, but eventually the opportunity to came here came up. And I figured, okay, I haven't seen that part of the world yet. It'd be nice to explore the family roots. And I learned there was a citizenship by descent program. So, hey, cool, second passport. Why not, right? But I actually did end up liking it here for those reasons I was talking about, where of all the places I'd been, it was one of the few places where it felt a bit like going back in time. Things slowed down a lot. There was an opportunity to just focus on doing things the way I wanted. Travel is very exciting, but you learn very quickly when you do it for a long time that there's a very big difference between a place you can hang out for a few months because it's fun and new and an adventure, and a place where you'd actually want to establish yourself and live the life you want and become part of the local culture or society. And my hope was to be able to do that in Armenia, which is, again, why I moved to Kalavan of all places. But I've had to adjust that vision based upon the reality of living here. And so the society I'm building now isn't dependent on its connection to Armenian culture, which is just as arbitrary as any other culture. It's based upon explicitly chosen values. We're trying to explicitly only bring here people who agree with us about some fundamental values in life. Things like respect for autonomy, individual responsibility, economic self-determination, personal growth as we see it. And even that is a really difficult task because most people don't actually know anything about themselves and what they care about, but they love the idea of having a free, luxurious place to live. And so they kind of just present themselves the way they think you want them to. And very few of them who come here actually really align with our vision and our values. The ones who do end up staying a long time, which is great. But even now, we've had to implement very, very strict filtering processes in the place just to kind of stay true to the vision we have, because it's part of that unconscious human need to try to change things to be the way you think they should be. So even when you get far away from society, somehow society finds a way to track you down and try to say, no, that's not how you should be living. I disapprove.
Okay. And when you said society that you're trying to create here, you mean the community of volunteers?
Well, that's what a society is, yes. On a micro level, it's the same thing if you move to a city of millions of people, just scaled up to the macro level. It's human beings, conscious agents interacting with each other for the perception of mutual benefit.
Okay. And can you also said a little bit about the vision of this place. Could you maybe clarify or tell me what is that vision that you're creating?
What is the vision here? Good question. It gets so diluted. There's been this brand dilution effect. Like, I know very strongly what I want it to be. And it's very hard to stay true to that the more people you bring in. And I believe there's probably a lot of research that has gone into like why most intentional communities fail. I believe the number one reason is probably that they don't have a very clear vision, or that they cannot enforce and uphold. I don't want to say enforce because it's not like we're holding a gun to people's heads saying, you have to believe what we believe. Or it's hard to monitor that the people who come here and participate actually align with what you've explicitly stated this place is about, which has always perplexed me because I don't go into like another religion's church and say, well, you shouldn't be this religion. You should be the religion I think you should be. Just accept that not every place is meant for me, right? And that's fine. You can go literal anywhere you want except my house and do whatever you want, and I won't stop you. But when you come to my house and you agree to certain things, implicitly or explicitly, then I get a bit frustrated when you've decided to suddenly change what those agreements are because you don't like them anymore. There's something very narcissistic about it, I think, where again, people just, they're frustrated that something isn't what they think it should be, even though they have no reason to expect it to be that way. I just want to tell these people, okay, go be that way on your own property. Like, why did you feel the need to come to my property and be that way? And of course, the answer is that most of them don't have their own property. So maybe it's like a sense of powerlessness or frustration that they don't get to live the way they want. So they think that they should come into someone else's house and say, well, I want to live the way I want here, not the way I think it should. And so the vision really is just giving people the freedom to explore without coercion, without force, without expectations, who they actually are and how they actually want to live. So there's a very big focus on education here, on developing new skills, on peacefully resolving conflicts through conversation and collaboration, because of course conflict on some level is inevitable. And all this stuff that's the result of that, like the eco-village aspect. If we're growing a lot of our own food now, we raise rabbits and ducks for meat and eggs. We plant a lot of fruit trees. That's a downstream effect of that. Yeah. It's not like that's the highest priority. We need to be growing an organic garden. That's the result of us deciding we wanted to learn how to do these things and to be self-sufficient as much as possible. We do a lot of alternative construction techniques, partially out of necessity, because you just have to work with the materials and the labor you have available in a remote location. And also because it's interesting, it's fun. It's like, well, I've never built an earth bag wall before. Have you? Can we try that? Let's see if it works. And once it works, the first time you start to find all kinds of new uses for this alternative construction technique you've never done before. The first toilet I built, like I said, was a dry compost toilet, not because I'm some kind of eco warrior who thinks all poop should be composted or something, but it was a practical necessity. It didn't have plumbing and needed a place to go to the bathroom. Yes, I'd never built a dry compost toilet before. It just seemed like the best way to solve my problem. And if you look at most of the neighbors, they go to the bathroom in outhouses. Most of them don't have indoor flush toilets. They have a big hole in the ground that they poop in their entire lives. And never once, with rare exception, do they stop and say, I wonder if there's a better way for us to handle this problem of going to the bathroom every day for our whole family. Is having a hole in the ground the best option for us? It smells bad. It's unsanitary. Who knows how much disease is spread through it? It's embarrassing when you have guests over and you got to point to the hole that they're supposed to take a dump in. Like, can you imagine? Like, and that's fine if that's all that's available to you. You got to do something, right? But to spend your whole life that way and never once ask, I wonder if we can improve upon this. Whereas in one day, I found a better solution that was more sanitary, more pleasant to use. And then eventually, of course, we upgraded to nice modern indoor bathrooms. That's what I'm talking about. That's the entrepreneurial mentality where you look at a problem and you say, what are all the possible ways I could solve this problem? And what are the realistic plans to implement those solutions? You don't just say, well, this is the way we do it. It's the way we've always done it. It's the way everyone around us does it. So I guess we'll just do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. And so talking about the vision of this place, you talk a lot about personal development. And can you tell me what that means to you?
Well, it's the development of the persona. Personal
okay.
What does that mean? Question, right? In its most basic form, it means becoming a more authentic version of yourself, which of course presupposes that there is a you that exists, right? That you are not just malleable clay that conforms to the conditions of the environment around you, but there is a fundamental you with its own set of values and preferences that exists, that you're born with on some level, probably determined by your genetics. And the journey of your life is discovering more and more of that person and actualizing more and more of that person through the actions you take. And fortunately, the vast majority of people in the world have very little understanding of who that person is, because from the time they're born, they're inundated with cultural influences that tell them, no, be this, be this, be this. You're a proud Armenian. This is what a proud Armenian is. Not whatever you would choose to be if left to your own devices, but what we think you should be. And you will be shunned and ostracized and shamed if you don't be what we think you should be.
Okay. Thank you. So I also wanted to ask you, what would you say, what would you like the locals to understand about this place and your work and what you stand for?
Well, currently most of the locals are terrified of us.
Okay.
Understandably.
But if they weren't, what would you like to tell them, show them, stuff like that?
I would like to encourage them to be more open-minded and to consider that just because something is different doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's a threat. And that some people really do just want to help. And we don't want to force our help on anyone. I don't go break down my neighbor's door and say, your kids have to learn English and have to learn American values. And all we're doing is giving them options and opportunities they didn't have before. We freely welcome them to come into the Kalavan Retreat Center and participate in our free English lessons, or have tried to lead various kinds of entrepreneurial training, or they can come see just, the unconventional ways we're growing food and building things, which it's not like we're the first people to ever do these things, but here in the local environment, we might be.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's ever been an earth bag wall built in Armenia until we did, because in a way it's like going back in time 50 to 100 years. So many of the things that are just normal to you, it's like they've literally never been exposed to these things before.
Yeah.
And you can either respond to that novelty, that newness, with curiosity and excitement, like, oh, wow, that's different. Let's go see what they're doing. And maybe you'll decide, okay, that's not for me, but isn't it interesting that they're doing it that way? Or you can respond the way most of them do, with fear and insecurity, anxiety. This is different than what I'm used to. Who is this guy? How can we trust him? His ways are different than our ways. He lets his dog come in the house with him and sleep in his bed. Can you believe such scandalous behavior? Like little things like that, again, it's all just cultural. And maybe there's a good reason not to let your dog sleep in the bed, or maybe it's actually a really good thing. And, maybe you should consider doing that with your own dog and multiply that by every little thing that they think they have to do it a certain way. Just open your mind to the possibility that there is more than one way to solve the various problems of living and to achieve happiness and self-fulfillment. And why should we try to shame and control people and force them to only do it in the way that we're used to?
Yeah, it's true. Going back to maybe a bit more material questions, what would you say is like your favorite thing that you built here in this center, by yourself or with the volunteers?
We do have a lot of interesting things. We're about to finish construction on a root cellar, as well as an apartment behind the house. We have 2 greenhouses now, which are just pretty cool. It's enough to grow enough vegetables probably to feed a few people, maybe not a full house, 10 people. We're about to finish our 3rd bathroom. Nice modern bathrooms with flush toilets. We installed a whole house radiator system, which includes going under the tile floors in the kitchen and bedroom on the bottom floor, which is pretty advanced for out here, considering there's no gas connections, and most people just have simple little wood stoves that heat one room to keep them warm all winter. And ours, we burn coal on the bottom floor and pump hot water throughout the whole house. So little things like that in the West, like, oh, you have a whole house heating system. Wow, who cares? But here it's like, that's a major innovation. Like, no one has done anything like that here. We just figured out how to do it. Yeah, or like, okay, so like we have a piano and some violins and guitars and ukuleles, which again, coming from California, so what? Who doesn't have a piano and a guitar, right? But out here, it's like we have a musical workshop, an opportunity for people who would never be exposed to these things. Yeah. Some of the kids come here and like to play them, and whether or not they ever like take it seriously as a skill to develop, just exposing them to things they would otherwise never be exposed to broadens their mind just a little bit. Right? Yeah. It just shows them there's more to life than the simple rural subsistence farming life they've been shown. And maybe they'll be curious enough to want to go to Yerevan someday and study something or travel to another country. It's just showing them the world is bigger than you know.
Yeah. Okay. And then now going, or maybe I also want to ask about the animals first, because you have a lot of animals. And I wanted to ask you about the cats and the dogs. Like, what's their story? Are they like rescues, or how did they end up here?
Yeah, they're all rescues in one form or another.
Okay.
So Popok, the dog,
Yes.
means walnut in Armenian. She was born the first winter here. Her mother was a stray who found me and asked to use my house to give birth. And I allowed her to, even though I'm not a dog person at all. I was a huge cat person my entire life. She had 5 puppies. We gave 4 of them and the mother away eventually. And I kept the one puppy that I liked, who turned out to be Popok. And she was very annoying as a puppy at first. But she grew up around people and cats, and now we often joke that she doesn't know she's a dog because she doesn't act like any of the other dogs in the village that are all kept, chained up outside and treated like guard dogs and barely fed and are trained to be aggressive. And she lives in the house with us like a person. And sleeps with the cats and is good around the ducks and the rabbits and like she doesn't even know that she's not allowed to go into other people's houses sometimes. If we walk to the neighbor's house, she follows us inside and like, well, there's the dog in the house. And we say, oh, sorry, she doesn't know. She just thinks she's allowed to go where people go because she just grown up that way. And so she's the first dog I've ever liked just because she doesn't act like a dog. She's grown emergent personality traits as a result of her upbringing, which is, I guess, kind of also what we try to encourage in people to grow beyond the limitations of what would otherwise be normal for you. The cats, most of them have come to me now just because somebody who lived in Yerevan found a disabled cat in the street and contacted me asking if I could take it because they know I take in a lot of animals. We've had a blind cat. We've had a 3-legged cat, and currently we have a 1-eyed cat, all that people just found in the street and said, hey, call that American who lives in a village. You put a lot of animals that no one else wants. Some of them were born here too. And so, yeah, it's just like, they're part of our interspecies micro community, right? Yeah. They're pets. They're dependent on us, of course, but we just treat them as members of the house, which includes sometimes they fight and we have to mediate between them and teach them to get along. And sometimes people come here and say, why do you let your cats in the kitchen? What's wrong with you? And you just want to say, like, fuck you, it's my house. Like, I can do whatever I want. If you don't like it, leave. Like, who told you that you could come in here and decide what the pets were allowed to do? You're in their house, not the other way around. People don't get that, though. Yeah.
But do you often have like visitors from here, from the locals? Do they come here, or do you visit the neighbors?
I would if they ever invited us over. Okay. I think maybe a few times in 7 years I've been invited to coffee or occasionally a meal at one of the neighbors' houses. And some of them who were initially very off-put by my presence here more recently have started to act a bit more neighborly. I think maybe they've gradually adjusted to this foreign presence here. Now sometimes they wave it to me and say, hi, how's it going, Bardos? Whereas before it was just like they just avoid us at all costs. A few of them were friendly to me right away. Our neighbor Sambel was one of the first people who actually befriended me, and I ended up hiring him to do almost all of the early construction work on the house just because he was the first person to show up and say, hey, I heard you needed to hire someone. Yeah. Can I help you get acquainted to the village? Can I, and he doesn't even speak English. He's like 55 years old. He's a grandfather, but somehow he has maintained an open mind and was outgoing and eager to learn and not run away from the foreign English speakers like everyone else did. And a few of the other young people too have come here and done some work around the house or played board games with us or learned some English from me. So there's very clearly 2 distinct categories. The ones that are open-minded enough, kind of like stray animals, like Popok's mother when she first learned there was a new person living in the village. She cautiously approached to see if I was friendly and I gave her some food. And then she decided, okay, I'm going to have my babies here. It's the same thing. Like a lot of them are just kind of like frightened stray animals, and most of them stay far away because they're afraid. But a few of them cautiously approach and say, this isn't so bad actually. We're okay with this American guy, right?
Okay. And do you have connections in like Yerevan as well? Because you said like the people who found those cats would contact you to, yeah.
I spent a few years trying to make connections in places like Dilijan and Yerevan, which proved very, very difficult because even though it's more materially developed there, Yerevan is basically like its own country. It feels like the modern world, and as soon as you go outside of Yerevan, it's like you've gone back in time to the Soviet Union again. But even there, it was very, very hard to make and execute plans with people. I contacted lots of educational organizations about books I'd written and my experience here, seeing if I could help teach or something. And almost all of them said, oh, that sounds amazing. We'd love to work with someone like you. And then they just stopped responding to your emails after a while. And nothing ever happens. And after a while, you just realize that's just how Armenians act. Everything is an idea, a someday, a plan that never turns into reality. And so I stopped trying after a while. I said, okay, well, I'm going to offer opportunities, and anyone who is brave enough and self-determined enough can come and act on the opportunities I'm offering. But I'm not going to chase down people anymore who cannot be trusted to follow through on anything. But we do have a bit of a brand name now. We are well known. I mean, I was personally just as this weird American who moved into a village, but now the Kalavan Retreat Center itself has become fairly well known. Much to our detriment because there's a brand dilution effect. So people hear about us, but they don't really learn anything that matters about us, and they form their own expectations about what we're doing here. But yeah, like among the cat people, people have heard of this weird American who takes disabled cats in a village somewhere, and I post a lot of photos of them on social media.
Okay, so you're active on social media.
Yeah. But again, that's people will either love or hate who I am and what we're doing. Many Armenians have seen me as a threat to their culture, to their way of life. I've received death threats from some young men who thought I was like encouraging Armenian women to be promiscuous whores by saying, hey, you don't just have to marry the person that your parents tell you to, and if you want, you can even have sex before marriage. Like, what a concept, right? Like, you can make your own choices about who you want to be, you want to live. Yeah. And they said, like, fuck you, how dare you, like, ruin our traditional way of life and encourage women to be immoral. And and there'll always be that kind of person who just view any kind of change, any kind of outside influence is it's like killing them, right? Because they identify so strongly with this way of seeing things, and they force other people to live this way too.
That's true. And what would you say is like the best thing about this place? Because we spoke a lot about the challenges of this place and the people, and yeah, I would like to also know what are the highlights of living here.
Amir, why have you been here so long?
It was something for me to say, especially the concept that he made here. Like here is a tiny America in a different...
in the traditional sense of America.
76 America, not modern Donald Trump's America.
Say like a Bush or like Carrington or like this America in the last 50 years. No, the tradition America or something. And especially for me, it was every time that I was here, I was thinking, maybe I have I should think like why I am here or something, and it was like in my head everywhere, thinking like why I am here, and something was happening that changed my mind. Like because of this I am here, and one of them, which for me was like a highlight, was the time that we were watching Star Wars for the first time in my life, and it was like more than 6 months ago, 9 months ago, maybe. And I realized the concept of to be Jedi, and that like maybe I discussed a lot with Craig, like why like this, and not because I was disagree, because I was wondering what the right thing is. And like one of the things about the Jedi is like they are killing without any emotion. How do you describe it?
Passion.
This passion, yeah, and they killing because it's necessary.
Like
defensive killing, like protecting innocent people, not just running around killing. Or not killing someone because you hate them, but because you realize it's necessary to defend. So you're no longer turning to the dark side.
No.
Yes, I've seen the development of his persona in the time he's been here, right? And so that's kind of the idea, to give people space and opportunity to not live according to external demands constantly, but to reflect upon what actually matters for them and who they want to be. And then Amir talks about things like, this is like a little America in the traditional sense. The original idea of America, which of course to a large degree it no longer embodies, but the original idea was to have a nation built up of people who wanted to live there because they shared the values that defined that nation, which was the first time in history that had ever been done. Not just tradition, not just culture, not monarchy or conquering new territory and forcing people to live a certain way, but just saying, hey, we're building a new world. That's literally what they call it, the new world. Yeah. And anybody who wants to come join us is welcome to here. Anybody who's willing to make the 2.5-month trip across the ocean and start a new life in the frontier is welcome here. So you have this selection bias of people who are willing to undertake great hardship because they believe in something, and that primarily what they believe in is their own right to exist the way they want. Freedoms have been religious oppression, political oppression, cultural oppression. And that's kind of what we tried to create here. We have the Statue of Liberty on the wall outside, and we're saying we don't really care like where you're from. We don't care what the color of your skin is. We don't care about any of the other stuff that people usually categorize you by. We care about whether you respect the same fundamental values that we do. And if you do, you're welcome to come be here. So we created our own little micro melting pot within Armenia that is a largely culturally and racially homogenous place.
Yeah.
So we've had people from maybe 50 countries here in the time we've been taking in guests and volunteers. A lot of them people like Amir from Iran who were leaving pretty unfavorable conditions back home, but many of whom were just other people like me who are just traveling through or looking to connect with like-minded people. And the challenge is, how do you maintain that? And keep it up to a certain standard that you've set without letting it become diluted by other people who want to do things their way and insist upon like invading your project to hijack it, essentially. And you realize that is a shockingly common human phenomenon. People are obsessed with making things their own when they really shouldn't.
Okay. Can you maybe tell me a bit about your travels? Where did you go? What was the plan or the plan?
Most of the time there wasn't a plan. Most of the time I was just going to whichever place I had an opportunity to go and which I perceived would challenge me most. I started in a very easy place. I went from California to Costa Rica, Central America, just because that was the first place I had an opportunity to go. It's not very far away. They speak Spanish. There's a lot of English. It's a developing country, but it's relatively, comfortable living conditions. A lot of people go there for vacation, and I had a great time there. But after that, it's like, okay, so am I done? Am I just going to spend the rest of my life in Central America because I liked it here? Or is it like, well, okay, I was so surprised by what I learned just from this experience of going to one other country and like how differently people do things here. And many of the things I just accepted as true about life in California don't necessarily apply here. So would the same thing hold true if I went to another country and another country and another country, not just the country next door, but a country on the other side of the planet? What if I go to China? What if I go to Iraq? What if I go to Africa somewhere? What if I, and so you start to, I like to say that I've been a little bit of everywhere. Because basically every continent except Antarctica I've been to, which obviously, there's almost 200 countries in the world. I've been to about a quarter of them. So obviously there's a ton of the world I didn't see, right? And probably never will see. But you get at least a general sense of, this is how things are in this corner of the world. This is how things are in this corner of the world. Interesting, right? And you get a kind of this global idea of the world that's gradually coming into focus. And so someone like me, obviously I've been more places than 99.9% of people ever will. And I can look back on like how I saw the world when I was a young man who'd never left California versus how do I see it now. And you realize someone like me, not me specifically, but someone like me has a much better idea of how the world works than 99% of people ever will. And I still feel like I barely understand anything, right? And yet people who understand much less than me will be so much more confident in their opinion about global politics and culture and society. And eventually, it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is people with the least knowledge are often the most confident. And they start to seem like children. When people start to try to lecture you on things you know so much more about than them. And you start trying to convince people of things because you can't really communicate a whole worldview to someone. You can only communicate facts to them. And most of them aren't willing to listen to facts. So again, all I can really do is provide an opportunity for people to learn, evolve, grow. That's why I write books, of course. If somebody wants to hear what I have to say in extensive detail about a particular subject, like the kinds of things I learned by traveling, well, I wrote a book about that. A book about lots of things. And very often now, when someone wants to argue with me about something that they have a really strong opinion on, and I don't want to waste my time arguing them, I say, okay, well, here's 300 pages I wrote about that. After you've read this, I'll be happy to continue this discussion with you, because otherwise everything I say is basically just going to be like reading the book to you, and I don't have time to do that. And of course, they never actually read the book because they don't actually want to learn what you have to say about a subject. They just want to be involved in a debate because it's exciting and validating for them or something. And so that's why I don't really take most people seriously. Which might seem like demeaning or arrogant or something, but it's true. Most people are not worth taking seriously. And they don't know what the fuck they're talking about on almost anything, but they really, really, really want to act like they do, and they really want you to treat them like they do. And so I want to focus on people who are worth talking to. And those are the kind of people I want to bring into my house too. Yeah. It's hard to find those people though.
And did you go to places that are similar to what you've created here while you were traveling, or not so much?
I wouldn't say they were quite similar to what we're doing here, but yeah, I particularly in parts of Latin America, there are a lot of expat communities or people who started little communities or retreats out in the jungle, or some are natural, just as their way to kind of get away from the world. And it's funny because in some places you go, it's just become an accepted normal thing, which kind of defeats the purpose of going against the grain. And here in Armenia, like I said, because there's this sense of separation, it feels like you've gone back in time 100 years here. Many things that would not be revolutionary in another part of the world are very, very revolutionary here. It's very noteworthy here. I think that's why we've gotten fairly well known in a short amount of time, because there's just no one else in this country doing anything like this. No one else was bold enough to, or inventive enough to, I don't know. And hopefully that starts to set a precedent that other people can do the kinds of things they want to. I like to think that in a way we are bringing the modern world to the people here. Again, does that sound like I'm fooling myself a bit? But it's true. It really seems like we're exposing the locals to ideas that otherwise they would never be exposed to.
Okay. But did you get any inspiration for this place from your travels, or was it more a process when you first came and you saw what worked, what didn't work, and that's how it became this place?
No, definitely. I was influenced by a lot of the things I saw happening in the countries I went to. And that's kind of what made me think if these things can be done and are working demonstrably in other parts of the world, why can't they be done here? Yeah. Right. And I wouldn't have that perspective or know it was possible to create a place like this if I hadn't seen things like that being done in other places.
Yeah. Okay. I also wanted to ask you about the volunteers a little bit. How do you think the volunteers have influenced this place? Because definitely they helped you build. But what has changed since you opened up to hosting volunteers and working with them?
So it's been almost 2 years since we started taking in international volunteers. Some of it has been very, very good. Amir has been here the longest of all the volunteers. He was one of the first to show up, and he's had the most positive effect, certainly, in terms of the construction skills he brings and his perspective working on other projects. And he aligns very strongly with our values, too. So he was a very lucky find. But also, there have been a lot of crazy people here. It's really quite shocking. And in fact, I'm going to write a book about it eventually, lessons learned in community management. We have a series of videos on our YouTube channel now, and sometimes we write blog posts too, just describing some of the things people have done here. And it's crazy things. And it's almost like they're in a contest to see who can find the next crazy thing to do, because it's never the same thing twice. We sometimes joke that if you let enough people into your house, eventually you will encounter every disorder in the DSM. We had a person here who was recently, who just refused to talk to anyone.
Okay.
Before he came here, he was very talkative, very helpful on the phone. He said he'd volunteered on lots of projects, had lots of eco-village experience and construction skills. And I said, okay, this is a good guy to come here. He shows up here, doesn't want to talk to anyone. He's very rude to anyone, insults them, argues with them if they try to talk with him or work with him on anything. But he worked very, very, very diligently on organizing the wood pile for a week. Right? So, I don't know what to do in a situation like this. If he didn't work at all, then I just say you need to leave, get out of the house. But he was working very, very hard on a task he chose himself that he really, really wanted to organize the wood pile. But he was a jerk to everyone, including me, while living in my house. And then one day he just left without telling anyone who was going. And so, after something like that happens, you're sitting there reflecting with everyone in the house, so he acted that way with all of you, right? It wasn't just me, right? What did he say anything to you? Did he act like you did something that offended him, or what was going on? And you don't know what to do in a situation like that, except think maybe this person's autistic or something. Maybe he just has zero social skills, but he's really hyper focused on organizing the wood for some reason. And you ask yourself, what could I have done to filter out this kind of person from coming here? How could I have predicted this is how he would be when he got here? I don't know. We try to implement finer and finer filters to attract the right people and keep out the wrong people, but still somehow they keep getting in and doing crazy things. I lectured a whole group of 5 people recently who unplugged the freezer for 3 days and didn't tell anyone about it. While they were moving the freezer, they unplugged it, and all the food started to melt, and they all knew about it, and not a single one bothered to check if the freezer was plugged in or tell me, the owner, hey, I think your freezer isn't working, until I found out myself. And then I started lecturing all of them, what the hell's wrong with you? There's hundreds of dollars in food in here. It could spoil. We could all get food poisoning. This was a group of people from 3 different countries, ranging from 20 years old to 45 years old. And I could not believe that I had to explain to this diverse group of people why you shouldn't let the food in the freezer melt. Yeah. And then I stopped and I said, strangely enough, this is the best possible experience I could ever get for raising kids. Because I have to live with the knowledge that there is a group of irresponsible idiots running around my house, potentially starting fires or leaving their toys on the stairs or unplugging appliances and not plugging them back in and not understanding why they have to be more responsible. Yeah. And the job of the parent is to run around and catch every mistake the child makes so that it doesn't turn into an emergency. And then with a child, you would teach them, here's why you don't set things on fire or unplug the freezer without telling anyone. But with an adult, you realize it's they've crossed out of that threshold where they could learn new behavior and self-reflect and mature as an individual. And they're just stuck in this perpetual state of infantility where they're expecting you to be daddy to them and then to take care of all their needs and to solve every problem they cause. And then you wonder, well, how the hell someone like that ended up at a personal development retreat center, except that they didn't realize that they were coming to a personal development retreat center. They thought they were coming to a free vacation. And so you realize there's something very, very wrong with how people are perceiving what you're trying to do when people like that keep coming to your project.
Yeah. But can I ask you, do you plan on raising a family here? Or
I would like to have kids eventually, yeah. And just in general, I would like to be able to establish conditions where it is healthy and sane to raise children who are not subject to cultural coercion and compulsion and all those things that we tried to escape by moving out to a rural location.
Yeah. Do you think it will be difficult to establish that for the children?
Well, the greatest difficulties would come from the society around us who try to interfere with that. Having kids is easy. It's the most natural thing in the world. People have been doing it for millions of years. Babies just show up sometimes. And what do you do with it? Well, you got to feed it. You got to take care of it, You got to raise it. And that's not the part I'm worried about at all. What I'm worried about is like, how would the government respond? How would neighbors respond? How would the world all around us say, that's not how you're supposed to do that. I refuse to let you do that.
Okay. Right? Okay. But for example, have you thought, maybe you haven't, I don't know. Have you thought about the school that they would go to? Did you think about those things, or do you have like a plan for that?
Put it to you the way I put it to my wife recently when we were talking about having kids and how we would raise them and schooling and all that. If you married Gordon Ramsay, would you go out for fast food every night? Do you know who Gordon Ramsay is?
Yes. That's my hero.
Very famous chef on a reality TV show. And by the same logic, if you married me, would you send your kids to an Armenian public school?
Okay, that way. Okay. So homeschooling?
Yeah, well, it's as much as is legally possible.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know how much we could get away with here. I'm going to look into it more. But like everything I was saying about, for instance, the local English teachers not knowing how to speak English. We'd think that'd be a basic requirement of the job to know the language that you're teaching, but they don't. And you can apply the same thing to virtually all subjects, right? Whatever it is they're learning, they're not going to learn the best possible version of it from anyone who meets the standards of a public school, right? For instance, even though I'm not a mathematician or a biologist, certainly I could do a better job teaching my children the basics of these in any other subjects better than anything they would do in a local school here. And at a certain point, hopefully by the time they're teenagers, they will be able to decide for themselves how they want to continue their own education.
Okay. Would you say, do you have still a lot of plans and ideas for the development of this place?
Yeah, well,
it's not done yet.
Physically, we're kind of just expanding outward, which I guess if we're using the America analogy, it's like the westward expansion. It started with the 13 colonies on the East Coast and eventually expanded all the way to the California coast, taking over the whole continent, basically. And that's what we're doing. We have about an acre, half hectare of property here, and we're really only using like the front third of it right now. And that's been enough to have 10 people living here comfortably. But we're now expanding further and further back because almost all of the basic work on the main house is done now. And so now we're building it like a staircase up to the upper back part of the property to make it easier to access. And so then once we're there, and it's easy to walk up there every day, we're going to start immediately noticing, what if we put a A-frame house here? What if we dug a hole here and did this? What if we, just by having enough of the right people with the right experience and the right creative mindset, you just start to see opportunities for improvement. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do with the back half of the property, but I'm sure we will figure it out very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. I used all my questions and thank you so much again for agreeing for the interview and for speaking about this place. It'll be very valuable for me, my research. And thank you again. It was very nice to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.